Join me today as we talk about Episode 7 of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about Episode 7 of Star Wars The Skeleton Crew, the penultimate episode. And so, as with previous episodes, this is going to be very spoiler-laden, so I'll try to give a little bit of non-spoiler stuff here in case you guys want to just hear that and then move on with your day. I thought this was a decent episode. I thought episode 6 was the better episode. In fact, I thought episode 6 was the best episode of the show so far. But that's not to say this was a bad episode. I haven't really encountered what I would call a bad episode of this show. Overall, I think the show's been good. It hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, run into any lore contradictions. In fact, this could easily have been set at several other points in the timeline because it's almost unimportant thus far in the show that it takes place after Return of the Jedi. Literally, I think you'd only have to change the line talking about Alderaan and missing the Galactic Civil War. So on that front, it's nice, because we're not constantly reminded of the stupidity that's down the road in the sequel trilogy. Thus far, there's one episode left that they could just completely screw it all up, but I don't think they're going to. Also, again, I'm puzzled why it took so long to make a show like this to try to appeal to kids, and because I think it would. Now, I think this was they're insanely strong Goonies vibes throughout this whole thing. The last episode even featured a scene straight from the Goonies. So, in that vein, whoever wrote this is definitely a big Goonies fan. Or has watched it a lot of times and just was subconsciously putting it in there, although I find that very hard to believe given just the level of stuff that's been in there. So, this kind of thing, like I said, would have helped to attract younger viewers who eventually become older viewers with money and have kids of their own, and the cycle this was like the missing piece of the puzzle, plus that whole everything else actually being competently made and not a total joke. That would have helped too. But this would have, really helped get another generation of people going and being interested in the franchise. And it might ultimately over time, but the initial push is probably not going to be there because I hear the ratings are really not great for this. And I think it's in a similar position to Solo, where I think Solo was punished for the sins of The Last Jedi. Because while The Last Jedi did good numbers, and so did Rise of Skywalker, they didn't quite hit the numbers that Disney thought they should hit and that everyone else thought they should hit, and Solo was released between them, and there was eventually pretty massive backlash against The Last Jedi, and I think people took it out on Solo. People that checked out or just pissed off at the direction of things and didn't want to be hoodwinked again, because Solo, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a masterpiece by any stretch, but it's better than the sequel trilogy. It's not as good as Rogue One, but it's better than the sequel trilogy. And it's overall decent. There's a few parts that are sketchy, and it does kind of feel like the plot is really made to justify the whole, we're running out of space gas part of The Last Jedi by having the plot focus on space gas. And by that I mean fuel, not just gaseous anomalies in space. So I think this is the same problem. The shows have had declining returns, and after the complete catastrophe that was The Acolyte, I think a lot of people were like, nah, I'm done. or I'm going to wait till I see reviews or something. And so the show, which seems to be getting good reviews it's getting good critical praise, and the shills, of course, falling all over themselves, and sometimes creepy ways, by the way, because this is a show with kids, and there's a fine line you gotta walk there. And some comments you just really don't want to make involving kids, and it seems some of the shills are making them, which isn't surprising because they come across as total weirdos to me anyway. So the problem though is, like, other people that are critical of Disney, like myself, also are saying the show's decent. It's not great, but it's decent. It would have been a more than acceptable entry into the Star Wars canon had everything else been going great. And people would have been like, it's not the greatest, but it's for kids, and there would have been some leeway, and I think it would have fit in just fine. But now this is more like, can the Skeleton Crew salvage the Star Wars franchise? And well, no, it can't. It was never going to. So, maybe that's what Andor Season 2 is going to attempt, because it turns out Andor Season 1 cost a hell of a lot of money. Like, way more than The Acolyte, apparently. And at the very least, it had critical acclaim, and like legitimate critical acclaim, and audience acclaim. It just didn't have the audience, and I think it suffered from a similar thing. Plus, it should have been named something else. The problem with naming it after Andor is, first of all, a lot of people are like, who? And the people that do know who Cassian Andor is like, oh, that plank of wood from Rogue One that kind of emoted a few times. Yeah, even though he's the central character, like, you should have named it something else, like, I don't know, Dawn of the Rebellion or something. In fact, I think I would have gone with that title. It's really good. They should have hired me on that one. Not to pat my own back or anything, but that's good. But yeah, like, that's what you're running into. So, anyway, so what do we got going on here in this episode? This would be the spoiler part for those of you who don't want to hear spoilers. Okay, so the kids, at the end of the last episode, managed to get a hold of the ship again, the Onyx Cinder. And so they've got the coordinates, they're going back home. Wim seems a little depressed about the whole thing, because he's still like, oh man, we still didn't have our big adventure. And Neil's trying to tell him, no, we did have an adventure. Like, we nearly got killed a couple times. We did some fun things. Like, you saved KB's life. Like, this was an adventure. This is what adventures are. And I guess Wim just doesn't want to go back to normality, and that's understandable. And because his planet's kind of boring. So he's kind of down. And then the pirates show up at the coordinates also. Well, they show up first. And they've got their it's not a destroyer, but it's a bigger ship that has fighters and everything on board, a cruiser of some kind. And the Shistavanian is still in charge. So they get there, and all they can see is this giant green swirling, death cloud, and their sensors can't penetrate beyond it, so they can't see that there is a planet on the other side of it. And so Jude Law's character is trying to tell him, hey, look, if it was just here that anyone could see it, like, it wouldn't be a lost planet that no one could find. He's like, it's got to be on the other side of this stuff. So they send a fighter in, and the fighter gets blown up. So then he's like, well, give me a ship and I'll go in there. And they're like, yeah, okay. Because they're thinking he's just going to run for it. And but then the Onyx Cinder shows up, and they're getting ready to I think they're getting ready to space him at that point. And he's like, hey, hold on, like, the captain, Ren 10, whatever, the pirate he keeps talking about, it's like, hey, if he made it, like, he made it in the Onyx Cinder, he's like, the key is on board that ship. So they tractor beam the ship over, they board it. Well, the Shistavanian goes on board first, and the kids have set up like a claw thing that grabs him, pulls him up off the ground, and like, if you take any steps closer, we're gonna kill him. And so then Jude Law walks up, picks his pistol up off the ground, and shoots and kills him. And then takes over the ship. So while this is happening, or just actually in the opening, the kids' parents sent up a buoy that's like broadcasting a signal telling them how to get through the clouds. And so they get arrested for what they did by the robots. And then the kids, they get captured. But then they're all like, Jude Law warns them, like, hey, we're going to take the ship down there. You're coming with us. You say anything, I'll kill you and your parents. And especially now that I know what they look like, because he got the buoy and got the message. So they're all on board the Onyx Cinder. And he's like, okay, well, I claim captainship of the Onyx Cinder. And that's when the droid kind of pipes in. He's like, there's a point of order there. Like, per the pirate code, you can only be the captain of one ship. And you're already the captain of the larger ship. So you have to designate someone else to be the captain of the Onyx Cinder. And so Fern throws her hat in the ring, I think. And then she basically says something about, claims he's disputed title. And SM-33 is like, yeah, good enough for me, and starts taking out all the pirates and throws them all out of the ship. And then they take off. And we didn't see it, but Jude Law's character got back on board. And so as they're going down through the atmosphere, he whips out the lightsaber and basically warns them, like, I'm going to kill you all if you blow my cover here. And so they realize that, from what they said, the ship probably came from At-Aten. And so they get down there, it goes on an autopilot, and outside the administrative building where the parents are, there's a big thing on the ground that opens up, and a landing pad comes up out of the ground. The ship lands on it, locks into place with stuff already there. So clearly it's expecting this exact kind of ship to show up. And so Jude Law comes out and claims to be a representative of the Republic, that he's here to pick up whatever, the cargo. So the ship starts to go underground, and like an elevator platform basically. And so then they pass the giant machine that's minting the credits, and it's this massive piece of machinery. And he sees that, you can start to see his eyes are going wide. Then they go down farther, and he's like, here's the vault. Then the vault opens up, and it's just as far as you can see back, and stacked like 50, 60 feet high are Republic credits, several feet deep. God only knows what kind of fortune's there. And he's like, remind me again how many vaults there are? And there's over 1,000 of them. So they're literally sitting on a treasure planet. So then their parents show up, and then it ends with all of them on the ramp to the ship with Jude Law having the lightsaber out and ignited. So, oh yeah, and he also cut off SM-33's head. He's possibly dead now. So yeah, one episode to go. Jude Law is down there, and he's trying to tell the droids that he has to make contact with his other ship so he can tell them how to come down through the atmosphere, presumably try to clean out all the bolts. Obviously they don't have that kind of space on the ship, but what they'll try to do is probably just capture the planet or something to that effect. Don't know how they'll accomplish that, because there's not that many of them, and there's a legion of robots down there, but who knows, we'll figure it out. So in summary, the kids are back home, Jude Law is there, the pirates are in the atmosphere, there's a whole lot of gold to go around, and yeah, I'm thinking that whole Jude Law joins the kids against the pirates thing, I'm thinking that's not going to happen. I think he's definitely he's down the dark side. I would kind of like to know his backstory, because he rambled something. He said, your focus determines your reality, to Wim back in, I think, the 5th episode. And that was something that Qui-Gon told Anakin at one point. So it's maybe that he was starting to be trained as a Jedi, and then everything fell apart. Order 66 happened, or maybe a Jedi that survived found him and started to train him, then he got killed, something to that effect. So we'll have to see. Hopefully they'll explain it in the next episode, but don't know, maybe they won't have time. Also, this episode illustrated something that I saw another gentleman talk about in a video a few months ago. And it being a few months ago, I probably have no hope of finding the video, so I apologize if you happen to be the person who said this, and I'm stealing your line here, your line of thought. I don't remember if the whole video was about this topic or was just like a subtopic, but it was someone delving into why it seems like in Star Wars, stealing, like people are after maps a lot, and things like that. And it has to do with the fact that in Star Wars, like these important things like giant industrial things, okay? Like you can't steal the Death Star, you know? So there's like, no. And so what you need are the technical readout to know how to blow it up. You know, like here on AT-AT, you can't steal this Republic Mint. I mean, it's a gigantic multi-story foundry kind of looking thing that's clearly like wired into the planet somehow. So what you need is the map to get to AT-AT to steal what the Mint is producing. You know, or like in Knights of the Old Republic, they need the star map so they can get to the Star Forge. And in Ahsoka, you know, they need the map so they know how to get to the planet where the Night Sisters are. You know, it's a common theme in Star Wars, and here it's illustrated, you know, quite nicely whenever you see the scale of the forge and everything. It's like, yeah, no, like stealing the forge would be an impossibility, but getting to the planet and stealing what the forge is producing, well, that's more reasonable, and for that you need a map. So yeah, that's this little side note. But anyway, that's about all I've got to say for this episode. I am looking forward to seeing how it all ends up. Unless things go certain ways, like I don't see where a season 2 would go with this. You know, because it's going to, you know, because otherwise the kids are going to end up back in space, or like the planet itself is going to have to come to grips with the fact that they are way behind on galactic news, and so season 2 would be more about, you know, them finding out what all's going on and everything. But then we'll probably lose the pirate vibes, which loses the whole reason to call it Skeleton Crew, and so we'll just have to see how it ends, to see if a season 2 is even viable. But I like what I've seen so far. I'm looking forward to episode 8. But that's most of what I've got to say on the matter. What do you folks have to say? Let me know down in the comments if you've been watching this, or if you intend on watching it later. If it sounds good, sounds bad, you know, anything like that. Are there any like Easter eggs that I have missed? I'm sure there are, because I keep seeing those videos like, oh, from the latest episode, here's the 113 Easter eggs, and I'm just like, I never watch those videos, so I don't know how accurate those counts are, but like, I don't believe there's 113 Easter eggs in these things. So, you know, to me it looks very clickbaity. But anyway, let me know if I'm wrong if you happen to watch those. But yeah, other than that, if you folks would be so kind as to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, if you're so inclined, and sharing and commenting are the things that helps grow the channel. We always appreciate it. But yeah, other than that, just remember, the Force will be with you always.